3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me for this episode is Cynthia Martin, mindset coach. Cynthia, how you doing?
Doing great, Adam. So happy to be here on your show and have an inspired conversation with you.
Indeed, I'm glad to have you. Let's start with got you involved with this.
So you shared that I'm a mindset coach. So the reason why I am in this field is really delving into wanting to understand how the mind works, right? And going further and deeper beyond the things that we've been told, right? And just wanting to always understand what makes people tick, because growing up, it wasn't always the greatest experiences, and having a very long history of trauma and, a lot of different growing and evolving experiences. I always wanted to know why people did the things that they did, and even understand myself, because I would find myself in positions where I was very aware of the things that I wanted to do, and aware of the habits and behaviors that I continue to exhibit, and not be able to make the changes very easily. So I began a lifelong pursuit on just wanting to understand the mind, and really ultimately leading to mastering the mind, because being exposed to these different ideas and having big kind of thoughts and lots of questions, there wasn't a whole lot out there. So it always just made, questions led to more questions, and the more answers led to more questions. And it led me to find that I was not living life the way I wanted to. I was following everybody else's rules, and I wasn't satisfied. I was on this personal development roller coaster, on major highs when I was in the right environments, and then when I come out of those environments and not around those kinds of people, I would crash hard, and it was almost kind of like an addiction, a drug almost, wanting to chase this feeling of connectedness, and just not being able to satisfy it. So, like I was saying, followed everybody's rules, everybody's plan for success, and just coming to a place where I was very unhappy and dissatisfied, even though on the surface I was doing the right things, doing all the, following the guru's methods of thinking positive, and reading the right books, and saying the right things, and affirmations, and all these processes that promised to lead to living happy and successful and fulfilled. And I was in a place where I had been doing it for years. I'm going on the closer edge of 30 years of personal development, both working on myself and learning and studying and growing my own practice and understanding, and I still haven't figured it all out. So the one thing that I came to find was the missing piece was really understanding the way the subconscious mind works, and the different levels of the mind, and the fact that there's a layer of spirituality to all of it. And you and I had a conversation before we came on the show together about how this understanding that we're all interconnected in some way, that we're not separate. I think that's kind of as concise of an explanation as I can make it. And then more importantly, I had come into my experience into parenting in a very traumatic way, which kind of catalyzed this, because I was pursuing answers for my little one, who was really struggling in a way that sparked some memories for me, some traumatic memories, and looking for answers with the traditional medical understanding wasn't cutting it, and my poor baby was struggling, and I was struggling, and I wasn't trusting myself. I came to find a lot of answers in communities that I used to deny and reject, because they were spiritual or woo-woo, or they were just these far out concepts that I always secretly, in the closet would read about and research, but I never allowed myself permission to pursue or consider that it was something that I would be interested in, let alone teach people. And I would call it an awakening of sorts, right? And not in the woo woo sense, but it's like awakening. I term it as an experience where something inside of you is profoundly out of alignment, that you have to pursue clarity and understand kind of where you fit, because I wasn't fitting my life anymore and things weren't just working because I wasn't able to control all of it. And the things that were making the most sense were not in the traditional communities of medicine, and at least back then anyways. So hopefully that kind of encapsulates the journey. But I really found that there's so much power within ourselves to find our own healing, to find our own method and path and rules about how we can live our ultimate best life, and satisfaction and joy and peace, and really attain the sovereignty that we all deserve as human beings. I don't care what your creed, your race, or otherwise your background is, to be able to just live well, and have the right to live well and healthy, and within the means to be able to feed your family and those kinds of things. So I really discovered that we can access that potential, and we all have it available to us. So that's kind of, in a summation, the roundabout way that I've kind of journeyed to come to this place to help people and really empower them to discover those potentials within themselves and really live greatly, beyond the traditional ways of success, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. I mean, it's to your point, everything we do, especially in competition, it's a mindset. And when I say competition, everything's competition. Whether it be play billiards, or you box, or you're an actor trying to get that role, mindset's big. I hear that often. And yeah, there is a spiritual, it has like a spiritualness to it, right? Because when you meditate and you focus intently on something, you have to be at peace with yourself. And I go through a lot of self-doubt. You know what I mean? I do it often. Yes. I have full conversations with myself, arguments, if you will, right? The little debates. And it plays a role. It's got a profound effect on you. If you approach something with a negative mindset, it's going to turn out negatively.
Yeah, it's a driving force in our lives. And what you just said is really significant, because that internal dialogue is literally, your conscious mind and subconscious mind at war with itself, right? It's like it plays this whole dramatization of an experience of like the shoulda, coulda, woulda's, and if I would have had this, I would have done that. Like it's playing all of these what ifs and could have scenarios. And it's an energetic drain, right? So, when I talk about spirituality, I don't talk about it in the sense of, and some people experience it and pursue it through the means of, conventional religious factions, right? And then other people pursue it through meditation. The way I explain spirituality, it's that personal relationship you have with that deep self-trust, where you have the faith in your abilities to be able to live well. If you've ever been in a situation where, if you've been become a parent, or if you've ever owned a pet, or like if you've ever experienced that moment of just being in love without conditions, right? With just like caring about something or someone so deeply. That's the spirituality, right? And I'd like to share my experience that I had with my husband, because although I'm a mindset coach, and I do really help people connect with their spirituality and whatever that means to them, right? It's a personal relationship. My definition is it's only applicable to me. Whatever you decide it is for you, that's for you. And this is how I like to share the story to really bring the point home. So my husband is kind of like on the total other side of this spectrum. He doesn't engage in conversation to learn more about it with me. He's not curious. He's good. He's in his lane and he loves it, but he does look to ways to connect. And I'll never forget one of the first moments that we had where I experienced his willingness to try to connect and understand my world. And he follows the news. He's a CNN guy. He's a data guy. He's like, logic and practicality, as am I. But that's like his whole world. And one day, I guess in one of his feeds, I don't know if it was like Harvard News or something like that, there was an article on spirituality, and it clicked for him because for him, it's music,
That
right?
makes sense.
The experience he has with music is the definition of spirituality. It's like when we can get lost in a place where the whole world falls away and we have no fear and we have no doubts and we can just be in our zone. Like being in the zone is spirituality, right? It's like this sense of an existence of something greater than just the environment that we live in. So that's why, I like to educate people in that way, because there's a very skewed misconception of what spirituality is, especially nowadays, because, everywhere we turn, you see magazines talking about crystals and all this stuff that is like hippity doo for some people and woo woo for others. But I like to really ground it and say, okay, well, you can be curious about that, because gemologists, if you look at crystals, it's not just about the way that some people use it in spiritual rituals, but really there's a really interesting science behind gemology. And when you start to look at the science of resonance and vibration and those kinds of things, it really starts to make sense. And I'd like to bridge that gap and bring that practicality and really ground that into everyday life, because it's not, again, I'm always seeking for opportunities to help people understand the ways that we're all interconnected, and the things that we have in common, versus focusing on the things that separate us and differentiate us, because we've been doing that for far too long and it doesn't work. That's why communication fails, because we're more motivated to talk about the things that make us different than we are in finding the things that we have in common, right? So this is I hope that in sharing that example with my husband, so whether it's music for runners, it's the runner's high. It's like that experience that they get where they're able to like free their mind from the noise of the everyday mental chatter. It's like this clear space of being able to just get lost in your zone of something that just kind of fills you up, that gives you joy. That's spirituality at its best, right?
Yeah.
Removing all of these other layers to it.
And to your point with music, especially with music's it can have a profound effect on you.
Yeah.
I example this by saying, if you're depressed and you listen to depressing music, it's going to echo.
Yeah.
If you want to pick yourself, you don't work out to depressing music, right? You want to put on a song that's going to lift you. And
Yes.
this is even better exampled in some churches, by the way. I don't knock religion. I try not to. I think,
Neither
again,
do I. Yeah.
I think religion's great across the board. All religions has a good positive message. And I say this a lot. It's good until some charismatic leader who's self-serving takes the helm. Then it's a problem.
Agreed.
So,
Yes.
but that being said, when I say example in churches, like, you go to these churches, I used to go with an ex, and when you walk in, the music's really upbeat. But when it comes to that moment when they want to collect the money, the tone changes, right? And you have this
The tithing.
right.
Yeah.
You have like this sense of like, wow, I should really do this, man. I'm feeling pretty down. Maybe I haven't done anything right. And then right when the collection's over, music's right back up again, right? So depending on the sermon, how they want you to feel is the tone of the music, right? It's
Right.
it's a fact.
Well, and the thing is when people are seeing, this is the thing. It's like when you get lost in the music, is you're not sitting there thinking about, oh, I don't, I wasn't able to pay my bill, and I feel guilty for not tithing because I want to give, right?
Right.
Or just whatever the reason is that the drop happens. It's like your heart's open, you're in the music, and you're lost, and nothing's expected of you other than just to sing. There's a resonance that happens, right? So I use a lot of resonance therapy, so that just means sound. So sound is one of the best ways to change a mood, and mood is just a reflection of an energetic resonance, a frequency. Just like in your radio, you change the channel, each station is a frequency, a hertz, right?
Right.
And you can only receive a signal that that vibrates on that string, that signal. You can't pick up an AM channel on an FM bandwidth. It just doesn't work, because they're two different frequencies. Well, moods and emotions and attitudes and mental energy is operating in that same way. So when you're in the song, as you were describing, right, like everybody's, their heart's open, they're not worrying about what happened before they walked in or the conversation they had 5 minutes before, and they're not even thinking about the tithing basket that comes around in 5 minutes. They're just in the moment. They felt like garbage. They're singing, and the intention is the common factor, right? Everybody is in agreement that this song is a praise, that it has its specific resonance, whether they're intellectually understanding that or not. But there's a feeling that they get when everybody's singing it. So there's this vibration that's resonating through the entire place that's going to uplift you. Now, whether you stay there is going to depend on how quickly you can go back into your old patterns of thinking, because that inner dialogue, that that
Yeah.
war of the roses that you had, that you were talking about, like, this entire argument that you had in your own mind with yourself, is going to, the needle on the record all over again, right? It starts to play again, and depending on how long you've been playing that record, is really going to have a potency behind it, right? Just think of a train. Like, it's been going on a track for an hour at 160 miles per hour. You're not going to be able to stand in front of it, stick your arm out, and stop it on a dime. It's just not going to happen. It has to slow down. So the more frequently you think about something, it amplifies, right? It operates as an amplifier, and the brain is actually an antenna. If you were to look at the biology, you can actually find that there's little bits of what they call, I believe it's magnetite, and it's a mineral. Okay, it's a mineral. It's actually magnetic. So the brain is functioning like an antenna. So you're constantly broadcasting waves of information. So, this is where I like to demystify a lot of these concepts that people talk about, manifesting, and what you put out into the universe, you get back. Well, how does that work? Well, it's because the body is electromagnetic. Like, your brain is actually functioning as an antenna. It's broadcasting and receiving constantly, and it's just data and information. So when we start, people get really curious with the whole spiritual stuff. Like, they always get questions about intuition and psychic abilities. Well, everybody has it. It's like, where it's a built-in mechanism of self-preservation that every human being has, right? That's why, like, everybody gets this weird feeling when you pass by, or have to walk down a dark alley, right? Like, it's just your spidey senses go off. Like, there's this self-preservation signal, that switch that flips on. That's intuition. But there's different levels of it, right? So demystifying it by saying it's just information, it's just data, it's an exchange of data. So I came from the telecom industry. I used to do product development, and it's just switches and channels, and just changing channels of information. Just all of the bandwidth that you get on your internet, the very thing that's connecting us right now, is just a bandwidth of frequencies and exchanging packets of information. Well, our bodies and our minds are operating in that same way. That's why people are able to pick up information. That's why you're able to think about somebody, and then all of a sudden the phone rings. Like, you're literally sending out a packet of information when you're thinking. And the thing is that most of us are not thinking consciously. We're thinking unconsciously. We're creatures of habit, and most of us are not in command of the things that we're thinking. So our mind is running us. So our thinking is running our lives, and it's creating the experiences that we engage in every single day. So to your point, what you were saying, if you're thinking negatively, then you're going to have a negative reality. And it's not just about changing your thinking from negative to positive, because I did that. I was doing the personal development thing for a long time, and I remember reaching this point where I was like, my words were positive, my thoughts overall were positive, but somewhere deep inside that I wasn't able to understand at that time. Internally, I was pissed. I was pissed off, and I was angry. And then I had a lot of shame and guilt, because here I am with, nearly, at that point, it was maybe about 10 years ago, I'm sitting here with 20 20 years almost of personal development, investing collectively hundreds of thousands of dollars on my personal growth, and I'm not where I need to be, or at least in my mind, right? Like, I'm doing all the right things. Why am I not farther ahead in life? And not that my life was bad. And this is the crazy part, that a lot of us that are on the personal development hamster wheel is that, we create this misguided notion that the amount of years or knowledge accumulated should be the reason why we should be advancing, and that it's the only thing that is required in order for us to succeed, right? Because I wasn't learning, I wasn't being exposed to, and I wasn't finding at that time that there was a much deeper level of work that needed to happen, and there was a gap between what I had already created and that part of me that was like, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was ashamed, and I felt like an imposter, because here I am living this life, having all this knowledge and all this experience, but yet I haven't created the very life that I said I wanted. The dream had not been delivered, right? And that's the big problem with this concept of just thinking positive, because it's not enough. You have to get to what's at the root of that, and that's the subconscious part. So that's why my work is what it is. We work at the level of subconscious, because that's why therapy, I've had so many clients who've been in therapy for decades. This is the crazy part for me. Like, I don't think it's working if you have to be in therapy for the same thing for more than a year. Like, that's
Yeah,
my
really.
philosophy. Truly, something's not working.
To support your point real quick, what you said earlier, that resonated with me. I say this to the paranormal people, to the psychics, to the ufology, to the health people. I say the same thing. Our brain is a complex computer. And I'm glad you said what you said about it being an antenna, because I think like you do. I think everyone is psychic. They just don't utilize that part of the brain, right? We have the hardware. We just don't have the software or the download. And
Right.
that's example too in these people that get significant head injuries, and they emerge doing amazing things afterward.
Yes.
And then what you said earlier too about, the whole mindset with the athletes. I watched this documentary on Netflix. It's called The Last Dance. Have you seen it?
I have not yet. I'm going to now.
You gotta watch it. It literally inspired me, and it's not about the money or the fame, but it's built around Michael Jordan and the '90s Bulls.
Oh, yes.
And when you hear what Jordan does to get himself to that level where he's going to perform, like even if he has to make up rivalries, he does it. He gets to this mental place where he's so intent and so focused. He does amazing things, and I believe personally that's a psychic ability. That's the power of the mind being unlocked. I talk to cops on this show too, a lot of detectives, and I hear the same thing from these detectives. I'm like, well, what led you to the capture of this guy? And it's like, well, this instinct, this gut feeling. At some point, you got to understand, like that's power of the mind, right? You're using a channel, you're on a frequency that other people aren't using. And to support what you said too, I go to bed at night listening to like Mozart at 432 hertz, because my brain doesn't turn off ever.
Yeah, and neither does mine. I have very vivid dreams. So, when you start to master the parts of your subconscious, you start to become aware even when you're asleep.
Yeah.
Right. At very different depths and levels, like it starts to increase. Right. So, and you're able to move into a space where you can, you can operate and do things. So I've worked with law enforcement and military personnel. And I believe, some of the most intuitive psychic people are in law enforcement, because you have to develop that part of your intuition in order for you to be able to perceive. And they even say, like in psychology, this like the mind of a murderer is not too far different than the mind of the police officer, the detective.
Right.
Because it's like it's a very fine line. It's like you're operating in this realm and dimension of the mind. And you brought up Michael Jordan. So he had this one of his practices in mastering his mind. He didn't dwell on losses. He didn't dwell. He actually would, and it's something that I teach my clients. So if somebody listening, really take this, you can revise the experience you have of something. So that inner dialogue that you were having, that full on argument,
Right.
You can intentionally, you can have that, rather than have it be an argument, you can revise the outcome. So what would it have gone like? What would have the conversation, so versus like, fighting yourself or trying to prove a point to this imaginal person that's not even there, because I remember I used to have a numerous, I'd be washing the dishes very rigorously, angry, and having a full on replay of a fight, the things that I should have said to my husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the point I should have made, right? Like, just, and this is the problem, is because we're more fixated on being right and proving ourselves in that moment that we'll even defeat ourselves in our own mind. So rather than doing that, it's like a way that you can take control is really allow yourself to have that experience, but do it more intentionally, where it's like, all right, what would the outcome that I would have preferred that would have been a win-win all the way around? What would I have said different? How would I have showed up different? What would my attitude have been if I was more peaceful and less reactive? So it's like role playing with yourself in your own mind and playing out a different narrative versus the one that's consuming you. Because when we do the I should have proven my point, or you got the best of me, because it's an attitude first, right? It's an
Right.
attitude first about what we think the situation is, or who the person we're in the situation with. The attitude is the first clue. Okay, so if we're having a full-on blown out in our mind with this person, or even ourselves, or what we should have could have done, it's because our attitude sucks. So
Yeah.
first it's an attitude adjustment, and then an opportunity, like, okay, so replay the narrative, because the mind doesn't know the difference of whether it's happening or not. So if you revise it in that moment, like within that, when it's still fresh, and you replay it, you actually start to shift the reality, and you start to shift the energy within your own body, and you start to get yourself out of the fight or flight. Okay, because a lot of reactivity is coming from having to defend ourselves, right?
Yeah, you're right. I'm very hard on myself, by the way. Very hard on
So
myself.
so imagine what would it be like if you changed that narrative and started saying you're not hard on yourself. What would it sound like for you to be kinder to yourself? And if you were to be able to be kinder to yourself, and what kind of solutions would you come up with if you're partnering with yourself in your mind versus beating yourself up,
Huh. That's food
right?
for thought. Yeah.
So really take that and consider it, like, why not? Like, you've done it this way for a really long time. What would it be like to stretch the muscle and see what else would happen? Because that's how the psychic ability that we're talking about, how it's basically just a stream of information that you open the floodgates. It's like you turn the faucet on and you let the flow, because that's what this concept of living in flow is like. People's experiencing awesome manifestation, because there's this illusion that manifestation is only an instance when you're getting what you want, when in fact you're using the mind to miscreate. You're misusing that powerful potential to create the crappy situations that we're in, right? You're manifesting 24/7. Let me go ahead and bust the secret of the secret. It's like you're manifesting 24/7 all the time, based on what you're thinking and feeling. The thing is that we have this idea that if we concentrate and monitor our thoughts and our words, that it's going to be enough to change the reality. You have to change your attitude and your identity first. So that's the big secret. Like, I just blew the whole industry right there in that one sentence. Okay, but that's the hard part, because we've been who we've been. We've accepted roles and expectations and narratives, and created an identity based on what everybody else told us about ourselves and how we reacted to that our whole life. So that's where the work comes in. That's where the shift happened for me, because I stopped just doing everything on the surface level, and I had to take a much deeper look and take full responsibility of how much of everything that I had at that point was of my own creation. And all the stuff that was making me angry and pissed off and dissatisfied was of my own creation, because of the attitude I had about it, the expectations that I placed on what I should have had and what I shouldn't have had, and what life should have looked like by then, instead of really being satisfied and taking that position, because nobody told me, hey, you can change the dialogue that you're having in your head and stop being hard on yourself. Stop leading life with that identity that you're this kind of person, and this is how you live life, and you procrastinate, and you overcommit, and like, all of these things are identities. And once we start to shed those layers, we start to find that the channel becomes more clear, and it becomes easier just to be who we naturally are, and that's just fully connected to that data that's available to us. Because we're talking about music earlier. If you ever heard any of the greats, like the Beatles, or the great, like Grateful Dead, like, if you, some of these interviews with the greats, right? They've always said, like, whenever they're asked that question, like, how did you come up with this song? And almost all of them say the same thing. They were either in a jam session. Yeah, some of them may have had some substances to help the process along, but they were in a state of flow, where they were not in it for the get. They were just kind of like jamming, and they were just and they channeled it. They even used that word, like they just channeled it. You know, James Cameron with the Avatar, the movie, he was asked a similar question, and he talked about like it was the whole movie was channeled in a dream, right?
Yeah,
And it,
I agree with you. It's weird I have a friend of mine who does art, and it's pretty abstract. And I would ask him, like, well, where do you come up with these weird concepts? And he's like, I just lay down and I have visions.
yeah,
And then he goes, when I have the vision, I start creating the vision. I start painting it in my mind. And then I walk over and I start painting. I was like, wow, that's
yeah.
amazing.
We all have that capacity. So like you, when you're so you have a high mental faculty, right? Like
Right.
we share that in common, like the thinking and the questions. That's an intelligence, right, on its own. But we're not taught to develop that. Like for some of us, we rebel, and we're going to do it anyways.
Right. Right.
But it can get in our way. But we're taught that we need to go against that grain, that it's too much or not the right way, whereas it's the natural flow of your intelligence and how you access that higher data. And what's getting in the way is those inner dialogues and that narrative of that identity that says I'm a person that's hard on myself.
Yeah.
So you can't even hear it.
In my personal life, the intelligence I have, it's better exampled on like the podcast or good conversation. But in my personal life, I describe it to people as this: I have an attorney, a representative, and a consultant in my head, right?
Yes.
And the attorney's always defensive, right? Whenever someone's arguing, that's to your point earlier. Like whenever the attorneys are, in other words, if I'm having an argument, the attorney won't let me lose the argument, whether I'm right or wrong. We're trying to find the loopholes, right?
Right.
Then the representative is the one that's, that's me speaking out loud.
He's on trial. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you got
trial.
then I have my consultant in my head who's kind of saying, well, hey man, maybe we should really think this through. I don't think you should have said that. And then what ends up happening is after an argument's done, those three representatives, after they depart, there's this other entity in my mind. And it's like, all right, man, you really got to recap what you did and just look it over,
That's your consciousness. That's your higher intelligence, your what I would call your spirit, right?
Yeah.
You might call it something else, but it's like the neutral party observer that's kind of watching this whole thing down with their arms crossed. It's like, are you done yet? Let me know when you're done.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think my personal belief anyway is that I think our soul and our consciousness are the same thing.
yes, I agree.
Raw energy.
Raw energy, yeah. But there's an awareness. So you brought something up that that doesn't get talked about too often because in psychology they want to go ahead and put a name on it and call it a dysfunction. Okay, but I believe that we are just in the same way that there's different energy and frequencies and signals on different radio stations. We are different people at a different state of consciousness and different state of emotion. Okay,
Right.
I'm not the same person when I'm at peace and I'm chilling, or when I get my feathers in a ruffle and I lose my patience. I'm two different people, and I think you can probably connect with that example, because we're not. Those are completely different experiences and expressions of ourselves. And just kind of how you said you had those three different those three different parts of you. We are different, expressing different aspects or dimensions of ourselves through those emotions that were born through some kind of experience. For me, a lot of them were, through trauma, because I had the rebel. To your point, I had the attorney. Oh my gosh. Like, just
Yeah.
for the sake of arguing and winning the case.
Yeah. Honestly, it's
no other logic.
yeah, it's like the best way to describe it to people is like, it's like my logic and my emotions are at battle all the time.
All the time.
And logic always wants to prevail because it's like, well, no, there's this point, and no, there's that point. That would be the attorney. It's when the emotional part sets in, when you realize what you did, you're like, shit.
Yeah. Well, and then the other part too. So this is one of the problems that I really, want to be of service and educate people, because there's a displacement for men. Okay, the men are being severely displaced right now. Right now the emphasis on women empowerment and all this, and I'm a woman, of course, I'm all for it. But I always come to that place where it's like, okay, we're now starting to move into this weird space of divide, right? So, what about the men? I was just having this conversation with my husband. It's like, and then it goes back to that same thing and how it shows up in what you were just saying is that there's that displacement. It's like men still haven't been given the opportunity or the support to be able to say, oh, okay, where does my emotional life really come into play? Where is it safe to show it? Where is it safe to share my ideas? Because everything is like so hypersensitive in every direction. So I don't even know how to feel.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and keep that stuff inside. I can't even share my thoughts if it has anything relatively emotional or if I feel a certain way about some specific topic that has to do with something outside of
I read a
spirit
study that women could utilize both halves of their brain simultaneously.
simultaneously.
Where men, and I kind of agree with this because when I'm angry, that's it. I'm angry. It's not till the aftermath. I'm like, all right, you're an asshole. You got to apologize, right? Because
Yeah.
that's when that's the representative. That's my representative. It's like, look, man, what's up?
Yeah. And one of the things that, because I remember very distinctly, I had this amazing client who he did a lot of undercover work. And he had developed that same kind of skill, but he was expressing it outwardly in very subtle ways. But there was like different identities being expressed at different times, depending on the circumstances. And he was burnt out because the protector, the lawyer, the
Right. Yeah. The guy that's
was
he,
the one that's taking care of everybody. He was done because he was on, and he was having to be, that part of him was being on when he didn't need to be.
right.
So what I helped him do is to develop this relationship with those parts versus saying, hey, you're this label that in psychotherapy they would give you. Let's go ahead and just honor that you have these parts of you and they all have a very important role to play, and you don't, that one particular one doesn't have to take the brunt of everything 24/7, and he gets to take a break and let this other part step in and they can collaborate.
Yeah, that's a good
Right?
idea. Imagine you're taking pause to have a meeting eternally,
Yes.
right?
Internal meeting. Yeah.
And to evaluate the scenario, the situation, and possibly come out with a better outcome. I agree with this, and that's probably something I should practice as opposed to just having a snappy answer. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Man. Witty with
The
people.
pause is powerful. The powerful pause is like, it's a gift in itself, not just to you, but to whoever else is in the experience with you, because it gives everybody a space to be like, oh, wait, hey, we don't have to fill the space because people are really uncomfortable with that space.
You know where that's a
to
good
do
example
it.
to be set is in the world of billiards, like pool. Really good players, and I played pool for a lot of years. It's a cognitive sport above all, and when you're down on a shot, the idea is you line up, you know where you're going to hit the ball. All the fundamentals are there, but you still take that pause to let everything kind of sink into the computer, your brain, and
Yes.
when you take that pause, 9 out of 10 times you're going to make the shot. You're going to have a good outcome. And I'm starting to see by what you're saying just about everyday life that makes sense.
That applies perfectly. That's a great example because that's what it is. That pause is the feminine energy. So just to kind of bring it into what you were saying between the female brain versus the men's brain, is that we both have the masculine and feminine energy. Okay, this has nothing to do with gender. Okay,
Right.
it's an energy. The masculine is the doing, the action, the one responding, whereas the feminine is the being, the evaluating, the feeling into that intuition. And then when they both come together, that's when the shot gets made. Because in that moment, in that pause, both the masculine and the feminine energy are working together. So it's a collaboration, it's a co-creative partnership between all those aspects of the human potential. Right?
Right.
And that you're able to maximize those opportunities, and things become more clear, and that's when you're in that state of flow, right? They're in that fluid zone where things are more clear, answers are more readily available, and you're able to respond versus react. Because when we're reacting, we're the one being witty and we're filling up the space before anybody else gets a chance to. Whereas you take that pause, like you were saying, you create an optimal opportunity for a greater outcome
Agreed.
that benefits everybody, right? Because even those of us that have been that person to fill in the space, because we have remorse, we generally don't want people to feel bad, and if we could, we would do different, right? But it's until we become aware of how that operates, and we stop fighting ourselves, and we stop operating with these narratives, we start to master our own mind so that we can be more engaged and conscious of how we're interacting with other people versus reacting or responding. It's a think of it, you're talking about the dance, right? That's the dance.
Yep.
It's it's that dance where it's like you're in flow, you're in rhythm, and you're not trying to step on anybody's feet by being the one to fill the space first.
Yeah. What, and a large part of that too. And when I first started speaking to you, I did a little reading, and a lot of my fireworks. And when I say fireworks, it's my mental attorney getting involved in like disputes. It's the ability to identify a chemical response, right? And then when you could come to the terms and realize, example, I had one ex-girlfriend. She scared me to death. I watched her in the same 5 minutes cry, scream, rage, laugh, and then relax. That terrified me, because that wasn't what she did in 5 minutes. Takes me an hour. So, but
it can be terrifying, even when you're in it.
yeah. So for me, when I get these rage moments where I'm angry, when I say rage moments, again, that's the chemical response. My mental attorney starts taking over. The representative and the other guy, they're sitting back saying, "All right, let him do his piece." It's me. I should be able to recognize that that's a chemical response, and it's time for pause. It's time for a meeting.
So the part of you that is that witness, that observer of all of you, yeah, that part knows it. But the attorney hasn't been given permission yet, and hasn't learned that he has the ability to tag the other co-counsel in. He doesn't treat those other two parts yet as co-counsel.
Right. So that's
Right.
something you have to a development, right? When you say mental development, that takes time.
And it doesn't take too much time if you have the right kind of support. So that's kind of part of the reason why, so this is the beauty of it. And as I was saying before, I've had clients who'd come to me who have been in therapy for forever, like 5, 10, 15. The longest one, he was in therapy for 35 years. And the problem with that is that you're solidifying the program because you're rehashing and reliving the problem.
Yeah.
And imagine, just it's a solid imprint. Like, you literally have, like the mob, you threw that bad boy in cement and you poured another layer of cement on top of it, and it's like you built a whole building over it, and it's solid in your psyche and your subconscious. So it's the operating system is functioning from that place. That's the root cause, right?
Right.
But the beauty is that the like, not starting to geek out, like the neuroplasticity, like that concept that is so incorrect and outdated, that the old dog can't learn new tricks, is so wrong, because the brain has this function, the mind has this ability to be able to rewire itself if you're able to approach it from the right point. Because I've had clients who, like, you're able to do in 3 weeks that my therapist couldn't do in 15 years.
Yeah, it's because your approach is more, I hate to say this, grounded in reality.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a jerk when I say this, but if you're in therapy for 10 years, you just go ahead and sue that therapist, because he's obviously not getting it done. Or
Right.
you have to take a different perspective of what's going on with you.
There has to be a shift in the approach. There has to be a different type of question that you got to be asking yourself as the person facilitating, right? So, and then, part of the problem too is because, and I'm not saying this because I don't know every thaerapist on the planet, but just in my experience and the experience of the clients that have come to me, is that the approach has been an old approach, and thankfully it's changing, because there's more cognitive behavioral understanding, and there's more integration happening in therapy. And I know a lot of really amazing therapists who take that approach, that integrative approach, that whole person approach. But unfortunately, the clients that had come to me were not, and they were just coming to relive this thing. And from my perspective, the problem is that there's this approach that somebody comes in with this challenge, and they're treating them as if there's something broken that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's the biggest issue with personal development, with healing, with therapy, because I don't approach anyone with this concept that they're broken, that they need to be fixed, that they even need to be healed, because they don't. They just need to learn how to kind of shed away all the things that they never were aligned with, wasn't for them, about them, and understand who they are and really kind of unbecome and unlearn everything that hasn't been for them their whole life. And that's really the only problem there is.
Not to use billiards as an example again, it's just something I know.
Is it relative? Yeah.
But yeah, like what you're saying, that maybe not broken. If you're not winning, it's not that you're broken. It's just there's adjustments that need to be made.
Yeah,
and you have to be mindful
just
of
like
it.
in your car.
Yeah. My brother's a psychologist, right? He's a children's psychologist. He went to school for a long time for that. And I commend him because kids, I don't know, man.
I have two of them, so it's a
yeah.
it's a tough one.
Imagine trying to get complex emotional, statements from them. Like I don't know. So to him, but how many therapists are out there that their clients are wealthy, and to them, you got to keep in mind, this is still a business, right?
It is a business, yeah.
And so they're probably like, this guy's nuts, and he's loaded. I got a paycheck for a while.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case. Unfortunately, and not everybody, because I still have faith in humanity, right? Because I know that they have to have some inkling or some part of them that has a desire to really help people. But unfortunately, just like any business, right? There's going to be people that they didn't go into it for the for the higher good of everybody. They thought it was a lucrative decision.
Yeah, because if you were making $5 an hour being a psychologist, I promise you wouldn't be doing it.
You wouldn't be doing it, right? And so it is. You're right. It's like you can have both, but still be in high integrity. So that's one of the first things. So like if anybody's listening right now and they're looking to work on themselves, to improve their life in any kind of way, whether therapy is the right way, because there's a lot, and again, let me clarify, there's a lot of wonderful modalities out there in therapy and the changes that are happening now is so much better, that you have access to therapies that are more integrative, so that they focus on the whole person. That's what you want to look for. But more than anything, whoever it is that you're going to talk to, you want to make sure that they're approaching you and your situation not from a place of you need to be fixed because you're broken or there's something wrong, right? It's about really creating alignment with who you really are and working with where you are versus trying to change you, because that's another, a second layer of what I feel is a misguided approach to personal development. Like this whole concept of being your better self as if who you are right now is not good enough.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the crap that we're talking to ourselves about anyways, right? We're like, I'm not good enough. Well, it's kind of like the self-defeating process. There's nothing that you need to fix or improve. It's just more like, I look at it in reverse. So there's this, Michelangelo, they talked about, I don't know if it's a quote or where I read it, but it really stood out to me because they asked Michelangelo, it's like, again, how did you come up with this idea, like what you were telling me about your friend who just, he channels it. He was asked because he used marble, right? And he had taken this piece of marble that was actually going to be discarded that turned out to be the David, right? Oh. It's like, yeah. And what he said is that I'm not creating anything. I'm just chiseling away the bits around what's the beauty that's already inside the marble.
Wow. That's a great statement.
Okay. So that's the approach that I take. That's the approach I'm inviting people to consider. Like when they're going to get help, don't go get help because you think that you need to be better or your life needs to be better. It's more like, go find someone that's going to help you chip away the things, because somebody else can see your blind spots and help you chip away the marble, because the beauty's already there. The perfection's already there. You just haven't been given the right tools. You haven't been given the right instruments. You haven't been given the right resources, knowledge, or wisdom to be able to cultivate that beauty. Because everybody has this genuine, incredible genius. There's not a single person on this planet that exists that doesn't have some kind of genius. The problem is that we've been been forced to grow up in systems that don't cultivate that. They don't nurture that, right? So I'm a big nerd with the hero comic books and stuff, mostly through the movies, but yeah. X-Men, I'll never forget, like when the whole X-Men, I was a kid when Stan Lee came out with the X-Men and Dr. Xavier, I was like, dude, I would love to have a school where I can, have a space where people can explore. And I still have this desire. Okay, that's like my grand big dream, to have a school or some kind of institution where people can come and explore the possibilities of their innate intuitive, like not just intuitive, but their innate genius. Like, what if you, instead of having a place where you sit down and you're given rhetoric to memorize, and this industrialized method of learning so that you can be a good assembly line worker, that you had people that facilitated nurturing your natural innate gifts and talents. Imagine what life would be like if you were given all the resources to develop what you're naturally born to do. What would life be like, right? And what if we were able to teach people how to collaborate and use those gifts to do better things in the world? Imagine what kind of innovation could happen, because, I've always used to think I was like black sheep, oddball, I'm very rebellious. And you know what all of those terms really mean? And I finally realized what it was. It means visionary.
Yep.
It means visionary. It doesn't mean any of that negative crap. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever been treated like that, you're the black sheep, you're the whatever, it doesn't mean you're better, but it means you're given the gift of innovation and vision.
And utilize that difference to pioneer something new.
Yes, because
I like the idea of there being an artist in everyone. They just have different kinds of
yes,
canvases. So I agree with that.
absolutely. Absolutely, because if we spent less time having those arguments with our own counsel, our inner counsel, and we decided to take a different approach, and started to treat ourselves with more kindness and compassion, and the way we would a stranger, right? And we spoke to ourselves in that kind of way, and we listened to ourselves in those parts of us. What would they say? Like, what kind of innovative ideas and possibilities and solutions could we come up with? That's always been, the gift of this kind of work that I've done, and just the way that my mind works, right? Because, even though I never decided to really, because I wanted to pursue any of the gigs that I've ever done, because I've came from an entrepreneurial family, so it's in my blood,
Right.
right? But I did all the right things. I did the college, I did the school. I was the first one to graduate. My parents are immigrants, and they did very well for themselves with the little education that they had. Like, they gave us a good life, but we had crap going on at home. So it wasn't always the best experience, but it was a good experience nonetheless. A lot of learning came from that, and then just pursuing that path that was given to me was an important piece of my puzzle, because I now have this ability to be able to have experienced a very dynamic background, from entrepreneurial to corporate, to startups, to all different forms of leadership and levels of leadership, that it really applies in how I'm able to teach people to empower themselves, right? Because all personal development really is a journey to empowerment. It's a journey to remembering who you really are, and then really being able to give yourself permission to pursue those parts of you and your true nature, so that you can live life the way you were meant to. And let me just say it to everybody: you're all meant to live well. Okay? If you're not living well, that's not what you're meant for. I don't care what your background is. Your history doesn't define your future. It only gives you tools of learning so you can apply them to do better, right? So those are the elements where you can look back, no matter what you've ever done in your history. Like, look for I call it treasure hunting. Like, instead of looking back and dwelling on the what went wrong, why don't you go treasure hunting and looking like what went right?
Yeah.
What have you done well? What did you learn that is useful that you're applying now? Because, if you're able to succeed even through a crappy history, and succeeding by meaning you're still alive, and you still have your capacities, and you still have your ability to wake up and walk into the world, and physically move and do things and decide, and have your mental faculties and at least somewhat intact, you have the potential to do really well and better than you did yesterday. But you have to change what you're looking at, so that what you see changes, what you see in front of you changes. So treasure hunt, like, go back in your history. Forget about what went wrong. You spent too much time there already. You're just challenge yourself to say, okay, what have I done right? When are the moments that things did go my way? When did I, come out ahead, or I got myself out of a situation, or I wasn't going to make it, but I did. just look for those little bits of treasure and build on that. Let that be the new foundation of what you're creating for your future.
Yeah,
Because
it's like you're manifesting alpha genes, is what it sounds like, right? You're, my
yeah,
aunt
that's
works in
one way to
corporate
look at it.
America. My aunt Jeannie works in corporate America for a long time, and like what you're saying. So a lot of what you're saying makes me think of her because she's one of those. She wakes up, she goes to work, no excuses. She doesn't let negativity get in her head. She just stays the course, and she has good outcomes for that, right? She's a very positive person.
Yeah, so there you go. So it sounds like her positivity, so, another way to look at it is like the positivity has to be not just in your thoughts, in your thinking and your language and what you're saying. It has to be in what you're feeling in your heart. So mind, body, spirit, that's what that really is. Okay,
Agreed.
your body has to feel the truth of what you're thinking and saying. Because that was a disconnect that I was talking about. Like in my mind and my words, my thinking and my language were great, but somewhere deep inside was someone saying, "Yeah, that's all BS."
How
Right?
many of when you talk to your clients, are you speaking to them about building like repetition or routine? Because for me, just to go to sleep at night, I have to have a routine because I know my mind, my computer, my brain will run all night. And I have, like you were saying earlier, I have really vivid dreams constantly. So much so I wear a Garmin Venue 2 watch, smartwatch, and it monitors my sleep. And it says I don't get quality sleep, although I know I'm sleeping some period of time, and I'm wondering how much that's from the dreams. I'm active in my sleep. So is there a routine you could build to have to develop this mindset?
So the first thing is a choice. Everything always starts with a choice and a decision.
Right.
Okay? You have to choose to change what you're saying to yourself. So first thing, right?
Right.
If you say, oh, based on what my watch is telling me, I don't get good sleep and my brain never shuts off. So that's the first thing you start to change. You start to say, oh, mentally, until it's true. Okay. Every day before you go to bed, oh, it's pretty cool because my brain, even though it used to like run all night, now it shuts off and I get good rest.
Yep. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
gonna.
So decide.
Because
So
for
first
me
decide.
now, I have to put on like I was telling you earlier, Mozart at 432 hertz, and I've only recently discovered the 432 hertz. I was
Yeah.
completely oblivious to all these different vibrations and patterns. And then even then, I'll begin the process by listening to a documentary, something about space or whatever, something educational at 432 hertz, and then in the playlist it'll transition to like a Mozart, and then I'll typically fall asleep to that.
So that's good. So that's the first thing. So I have this. If you do want to like a process, I call it the power hour. So that means everything has to shut down so the brain has an opportunity to decompress.
Oh, I don't
Okay.
do that. That's a good point. I gotta write that down.
Okay. So like give your you can do the Mozart in the background,
Right.
very subtle, but that means turning off the TV, turning off all stimulation of all sorts, and that way you're being intentional with that last hour of your day. And if it's all if you're always running in your head, that means it doesn't have a space to go. So you can either, even if it's scribbling in circles on a page
Huh.
or drawing or coloring, it's putting that energy somewhere. Because think of it in the sense of it's just energy. Okay,
Right.
thoughts are just energy, emotions are just energy in motion. Okay, so it needs somewhere to go, just like like when you put a pot of water to boil, like in a tea kettle, it starts to whistle because it has to go somewhere. It builds up steam, otherwise the pot would explode if it was sealed, right?
Right.
Because of the pressure that builds. Thinking is the same way. You're building a pressure pot in your mind that it doesn't have anywhere to go. So what's it going to do? It's going to continue to process. Like the computer's always on, with apps running, versus, yeah, it could be on, in sleep mode, but it's not sitting there running all these applications.
Yeah, it's a good point because I don't have an airplane mode. Something's constantly. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I can come out of a dead sleep and even from a dream and immediately start thinking about the day, even though it's long before I should be up. It keeps me up. It's terrible.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, the optimal function of brain waves, there's that last hour is really key. Okay, because whatever you go to sleep thinking about and feeling about is what you're going to operate your next day in, because that's the operating mode. Okay, so it's really important. So if you want that process, it's like that last hour. I call it the power hour, and it's everything's off. You disconnect. You don't answer your email. You don't look at your computer. No screens whatsoever. Music that's relaxing with the frequencies. So 432 is good. 528 is really good. Before, and if you're going to listen to anything while you're sleeping, the 432 is a good one. But it's not always going to be the same, because your brain waves your body's going to need different things. So 528, right. 500 is a frequency of love. So 528 is a good one.
500 is like, love. 500 even.
So 528 is because on the resonance scale, yeah. So 528 is the ideal. For you to harmonize the brain, the right and the left brain is always good, because you're connecting the mind and the body, and love is kind of like the core of everything.
Right.
The frequency of love is the core of everything. At the end of the day, all any human being wants, because we thrive on love. The absence of love, then we're always in defense, and we're in crisis, and we're in self-preservation, and we're in fight or flight.
Right.
That's just it. Like, whether you believe in the concept of love, I'm not talking about, romantic love and all that stuff. It's just this frequency.
Oh, yeah. You could just look, I love Cheerios.
Right.
So I get it.
So you get it. Yeah, but just for your audience, just to make that distinction.
Right.
Because people hear that word, and for a lot of people, love is actually scary. So most of my, I would say like 90% of my clients, they have some extreme trauma in their history. Okay. Childhood, right. Whatever. So, for a lot of them, they're very intelligent, good people, service and all this, but they're burnt out because too much output, not enough input. And because of these past experiences that are imprinted in their subconscious psyche, that love is actually dangerous. Okay, that's why we put a wall.
Right.
Because love is dangerous, because the time that we allowed ourselves to love and the way it was supposed to be, someone hurt us. Okay? And there's different degrees of trauma. Not every trauma is the same. Someone can have, something as simple as like a dog come too close to them, and that's like, equally as severe as someone who's had some really ugly, violent trauma. But the experience for them is the same.
Yeah, ultimately, trust has been disabled.
Yes, the trust, and the biggest trust is the self-trust, because the self-trust is usually the biggest issue, because they trusted themselves to allow this experience, and then this is what happened, so they can't trust themselves anymore. Right? That's where the doubt comes in. But ultimately, it can be a scary place. So the frequency of love, it starts to at least harmonize in your field, right? So when I talk about the field, for those that don't know, when we're talking about energy, if you've ever, shuffled your feet, just kind of like basic principle, if you ever shuffled your feet on a carpet and shocked your brother or sister or your auntie or your mom or your dad, that's a transference of energy, right? But then there's a layer, because we have, think of it kind of like as a little bubble of energy that is our own. Some people can call it aura, some people call it your field. I won't go into the weeds with all the terminology, but we all have our own signature, our own field of energy. And when we're interacting with other people, even just standing next to someone in line at the Starbucks, you're overlapping your energy field. That's why, like, you can be in a really, really good mood and then be around somebody and all of a sudden you feel drained, right? There's a transference of energy. You're exchanging energy, right? So, all of that, what you think about, it's influencing that field. So you just want to be able to get into a space where you can introduce things like what you were saying, whether it's the Mozart with the 432, or even if it's just regular music that you enjoy that makes you feel good. Okay?
Right.
It doesn't have to be the ones with the frequency. If something that your brain can recognize and it enjoys, the goal is joy. Enjoyment.
Exactly. I say this because try to imagine. I clean the house. No matter what I do, it's involved. Always cleaning the house, making breakfast, going to bed, whatever it is. Right? Music's big for me. So I try to imagine in my head listening to like thrash metal
That's a different energy.
Yeah, by the end of that experience, you've trashed your own house. You know.
You got to be careful. Yeah, you don't want to be. Don't bring the wrong energy into the wrong activity.
Yeah, and there's people out there. They say things like, "Oh, well, you can't. People aren't going to affect you." I'm like, that's erroneous. If you go in a room full of negativity, you're going to feel the effects of that. Period.
Oh man, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're sensitive to that stuff or not. Like you're gonna feel it, or you're gonna take it home with you. Like people, listen. Even if you've heard that term where it's like, don't come home and hit the wife and kick the dog. Like,
Yeah.
just leave your stuff at work, right? But we don't do that. We don't know how to separate ourselves, and that's an energy that you're carrying from one space to another. And you're the instrument that's doing the transference. So if you can't shut it off, you're not disconnecting. It's like you have to unplug from these environments, and you got to do things. So like taking a walk in nature, there's what they call negative ions. When you go by the beach, you feel more relaxed. Why? Because there's actually negative ions that influence the brain and the body that make you more relaxed. When you go on vacation, if you go to the Grand Canyon or these natural places, anywhere where there's trees, there's an environment of negative ions. Just sitting outside in the early mornings, or in that first hour when the sun comes up, or when the last hour when the sun's setting, you can sit and just kind of like sit in the sun for a little bit. You're getting those negative ions and resetting, putting your feet, they call it grounding or earthing. You can put your bare feet on the ground for like 5-10 minutes, and you kind of stabilize the energy in the body, because you have to shut off the noise, and it's all dirty energy. So the screen time and all that stuff, it's dirty energy, and it depletes your own human energy, right? So all of those things play in, and then you're interacting with other people, and if they're having a bad day, you're exchanging that. And why the exchange happens is because we operate in those modes, so we're mirroring. So it exists in our own field. So we're like, oh, okay, I know this. Okay, tag, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Because nobody's taking our energy. That's the other thing. Like we have to take personal responsibility. This is a hard one for a lot of people, because it's easier to say, hey, it was their fault, or they're in a crappy mood, or they're this kind of person. They're always so negative. Well, guess what? You joined the party. You didn't need an invitation. You said yes by listening to it. You agreed with it. You empathized with it. So you just brought your energy level down to where they were and matched it.
Yeah, and and then when you don't, again, it's like that recognizing a chemical response. When you're not taking that moment of pause, it's going to be really weird in the future now, as of learning this, because
you can't unknow this.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is I'm going to have a disagreement with someone, and I'm going to sit down and be quiet. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm having a meeting.
I'm having a meeting. But you know what? That's going to be a powerful gift that you're going to give to anybody who shares that, because they'll never be the same after that, because you're going to give them an opportunity to think of it in that way, to give themselves the gift of the pause.
Yeah, it allow cooler heads to prevail.
Imagine what you can do, and all you did was take that extra little moment to say, you know what? Give me a minute. Let me go ahead and think about this.
Yeah, I'm going to start telling people, I'm taking a meeting. We'll talk in a minute.
Exactly. I talk to you in a minute. Let me get myself in the right place. Let me get my counsel on the same page.
Yeah. I got the attorney in there with all the defense jargon ready.
So, and again, and this is the key thing. We got to stop fighting ourselves, because people come to me all the time like, I can't stop the negative thinking. Well, stop trying to stop it.
Right.
Stop trying to stop it. Give it a time limit, right? So just like in a courtroom, the attorney has, first line of questioning, and then their turn is done, and then the other side gets to talk.
Right.
Operate your meeting in that same way. So don't try to stop what you naturally do, even if you don't think it's functioning for you. Make it work for you, right?
That's a good point.
This is the problem that people are always trying. Again, this is an example of how we try to fix ourselves. We're trying to stop the natural order of how we operate, even if it's not the best. Work with it, use it in your favor, leverage it. It's all about leveraging what you already do. And it's not a bad thing, because people always tell me, especially those that are trying to meditate for the first time, or they're trying to incorporate this idea of meditating, they want to do it the way they've seen it on TV or how their friend does it. I'm like, no. How is it easiest for you to concentrate? Like, what makes it easy for you to focus on? For you, you said music. All right, then music gets to be the place where you go and then follow the trail of what you want next.
Yeah.
All right, like ease yourself into what works for you, and then people always say to me, I like my mind doesn't stop. Well, stop trying to stop it. Just watch it like a movie. What do you see instead? Observe it
You
and see
know,
what happens.
it's so I do this thing where I visionize. I put things into a visual in my mind. And by what you're describing, I'm seeing myself in a room putting up a bullet, like a presentation, and evaluating the situation, and then looking at it from all parts, which is something I don't typically do. Again, my attorney always prevails, but I'm now knowing to pause. I'm going to work with that. But it's not until my attorney's done ranting is when the representative's like, all right, man, it's time to examine this. Too late, damage done. So I think what I need to do is apply the pause, go to a meeting, and then use that same thing, that concept of evaluating. It's just reminding myself to get to that point every time.
Well, so give your attorney the lead. He has permission to be the first one to speak because that's what he wants to do.
Right.
But he has to do it in a way that supports the case.
Right. In a closed court area, right?
Right. Right. Where if he's going to do the presentation, well, then what's the goal? Like, so your goal is your intention now from now on is what's the point of your pause for you? Like, what is the outcome that you want? So you got to have that's the intention, because in this whole idea of manifesting or mastering your mind, you have to work with intention. So what's the point of you doing this? What do you want out of it? What's the benefit to you and those involved?
Peaceful dialogue and results.
There you go.
Right.
And results. Okay, so now you know your intention. So that's the marching orders for counsel, and that's where your the attorney has to know what the end game is so that he can operate accordingly.
I agree with this wholeheartedly. By the way, take a lot of hand notes. I'm writing a lot of this down.
Well, I'm glad it's supporting you, and I really hope that it supports those that are listening, because this is why I really wanted to have this conversation about really changing this approach to our pursuit of personal development, personal mastery, healing, therapy. It's not to change who you are, it's to take who you are, because even if you were born to do something a certain way, life has been such for you that you had to adapt and adopt and navigate things under your circumstances, right? But again, it doesn't define your future. So take the best of what you've learned and apply it in a way that is masterful for you, so that you can leverage it and create success for yourself in a way that's unique to you.
Right.
Because everybody, you might have already a genius to start with, but we develop these wonderful skill sets throughout life, through experience, that we can use and utilize versus negate. Because one of my things I always used to, I see people, who hustle, or I grew up, knowing people that were in gangs and friends who were in gangs, and I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, right? I was born in the late 70s, grew up in the 80s. The Crips and the Bloods and all this stuff was really rampant when I was a kid, and just, an awareness of that stuff, and then just things going on. And I always wondered, like, even watching, I was always fascinated by, I'm always fascinated by people's stories, because again, I want to know how people tick. And I think people who had to pursue that life for whatever reason, through the conditions or circumstances that led them there. But I wondered, I'm like, imagine if you actually gave those individuals the potential to do good with it, what would they do? And I always imagined, going to gang leaders and gang members who were dealing drugs and stuff like that, and say, hey, what would you like to do good with this? Because I would rather, and this is an outrageous thing to say, but whenever I would hire people, I never hired them based on their accolades. I wanted to always hire the one that knew how to make $1 out of 15 cents, that can MacGyver the crap out of whatever situation needed, because that takes a certain quality.
Yeah.
That's not something that you learn, right? That's an innovator. That's a really valuable skill set that usually stems from survival.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
The only caution I exercise with that is sometimes, especially with gang leaders, this is for you to be, first off, if you're the leader of a bunch of aggressive alphas, it's because you're extremely charismatic, right? You know how to use your words, right? There's a psychology there.
Absolutely.
Even above being tough, because even the toughest guy in the world, if he gets shot, it's game over, right?
Game over, right?
So that could be said. That's why I exampled that in the in religion too. It's always someone charismatic at the helm who's very self-serving. But to your point, the ability to do that takes fantastic qualities. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, that's why I say if you nurture it teach people to use that to do good with it,
Right. To elevate themselves out of that environment.
Elevate them out of that environment. That's kind of the thread that I'm going down because,
right.
Not that I would today go down and invite a gang leader because their thinking is not that way. Right.
Right.
So, but it was just always this curiosity. It's like this potential that these individuals have under the circumstances that they were able to create these things. Imagine what they could do had they the right resources and learn how to do good with them.
Yeah, imagine reforming
communities, reforming,
yeah,
and elevating communities. Because I do, like I live in LA, so there's an organization. Oh my gosh, it's Homeboy Industries, where they take people that have been incarcerated and they give them jobs. And they teach them the craft of like baking and things like that. And the really interesting thing, I remember reading the gentleman who started it. He would bring in these kids, and these young men. Some of them were older who had been incarcerated for a really long time, and they were rival gangs. And they're like, I'm not, right? The gang attitude is like, I'm not working, da 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 da. But he cultivated this environment of empowerment to where they all became family, and were able to experience humanity at another level, where they were able to be seen and heard and given those resources that I'm talking about, where
right.
they elevated themselves and they elevated their community despite the differences. So these are the types of stories that I'm always fascinated by. These are the types of things that I endeavor to create in the future, because number one, I don't care who it is, right? Unless they're a far gone case. Even the most seasoned, like people who've been incarcerated for a long time, will get to a point where they say, like, I wish I could have done things different.
Of course. And
things different.
It takes it's people say it's a lot, but you can learn from mistakes. But also you learn with time and wisdom, right? Because you definitely would not, well, not everyone, I can't say this for everyone, but the majority of people will not behave the way they did in their 50s as they did in their 20s. They use a lot of hindsight. It allows them to see things with clarity from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
I'm an example of that. I was a punk when I was a teen. It's bad. Really. I mean, I wanted to be
most of us are.
Yeah. I mean, at a young age, I learned how to box. I was just in a, bad way. And then even it was in somewhere in my mid 20s is when I recognized, like, all right, I'm being a jerk. I got to turn this around. And even now, I still have to take now with this new pause method I'm going to use. I'm going to go into meetings.
There you're going to go into meetings, right?
Yeah, because it's needed.
But that's the thing. It's what it takes first is people being willing to sit down and have a conversation and to listen to one another. Because,
right.
Again, stories. There's a woman who became the principal, I want to say in Detroit. I don't remember exactly. I wish I had this information clear. But nonetheless, she's a principal of a high school, brand new, and in one of the most devastated communities, underserved, underprivileged, poor, and made lots and lots of violence, and she had death threats on her life, and she was trying to create reform in this school, but the level of violence was so outrageous, and there was a mass I guess there was a one of the mass shootings, and they had brought in all the students into the auditorium to show them a video, and the kids were laughing.
Damn.
At this tragedy. Well, the reason why is because they see that every day. So they didn't have the empathy.
Yeah, I worry about that. Not just for people in that environment. There's this thing, and I was just reading a study about it, with people who play very violent video games, and they become desensitized to maybe not what they're seeing in real life, but the concept, Yes. And so even when I talk to the UFO people, like, well, what happens if aliens do land on this planet? Well, the majority of children are like, wow, that's cool. All right, back to my game.
Back to my game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have a point because we are all being desensitized. It's not just video games. We're being programmed by everything that we're watching all day. Like we're so consumed by the digital world, right?
Yeah.
But but that's a good point because this lady at this high school, she realized what the real problem is. Like she couldn't reach them because they had already had seen so much, and then they become so desensitized that she couldn't reach them the way that she was trying to, that other systems would have tried to. And instead, she was bold enough to take the approach. And it might be, might ruffle some feathers. People will be like, screw that, right? What love, whatever. But she took the approach of expressing love to these kids. And she turned this entire school around and created a safe environment in one of the most violent places in America.
That is a possible thing to do, right? Because
Well, she did it.
Another example of that, I watch these videos. They break my heart every time. I watch these videos of dog rescues. And I saw one today. I almost went into tears. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I thought to myself, like, there's no way this dog turns around. It was obviously abused. It was very violent because it didn't want to be abused any further. And you see the transference. And the woman always spoke softly. She was very kind and caring. She turned the psychology of that animal around. Now that's an animal that doesn't have the complex thoughts we have or the complex emotions. So if we could do it in an animal, we should very easily do it in a human being.
Yeah. And we do all the time. It's just we don't have enough of that in the media.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right? And that's, and it's as simple as that. It's as simple as like what we were saying and the benefit of your pause, right? Of being able to create the space where it's safe enough not to have to fill it with a quick witty comeback and to be the first one to be right, or the one to right, like the peacock, the situation, and rather just be like, hey, I'm approaching this from a place of genuine compassion because I don't want to be that person, right? I want to have that peaceful, intelligent conversation with a good resolution, right?
Right.
A win-win, even if it means we disagree. It doesn't mean that a win-win is not optional. It's not possible. It's like there's still the possibility of a win-win even if you disagree, and that's the part of communication that we really have to start to move into in leadership and to cultivate that, because people are afraid to have conversation where people disagree. And those are my favorite conversations because I used to, again, I was in product development, I was in product management, and I used to have to herd C-level cats, right? Like I used to have to herd these very high-level, high-profile people in my organization because I used to have products come to launch, but it didn't function without getting all the moving parts and everybody's input. And I had the power to influence what we needed in our market. So long story short, I remember being able to bring, and I would always say, I'm like, I don't want the head guy. I want the guy who had to figure out how to use a paper clip and a rubber band to fix the thing that was broken so that we can deliver the service that we promised. I don't want you guys. I want the guys on the front lines. And the first meetings were always the same. It's like, oh, but you guys don't like the finger pointing.
Yeah.
And it would always come to the same conversation. I don't care what your title is. I don't care who you are outside of this room. Everybody's the same. I don't care how young you are, how old you are. You either bring wisdom and knowledge that is going to be valuable to the end result, or you guys don't have to be part of this meeting. I'm not here to talk about the problems. I want solutions. And it was the most incredible experiences that I had, because all of a sudden people started to be able to say, well, you know what? I don't agree with that. And then the question was always, well, how come? Tell me what your thoughts are. And we were able to create this really incredible dialogue. And when people were challenging each other, it made each other think.
Yeah, you need pushback. An example for me, recently I had someone say something negative or not even negative. It was constructive criticism in one of the comments, right? It could be viewed negatively, but I didn't view it negatively. I viewed the criticism as, all right, this is something I should really take under advisement. I need to think about it. If I'm going to be on a podcast, I have this tendency to treat the podcast like it's two people just, hanging out at a bar talking and people get to eavesdrop on it, which I like that format. Mm-hmm. But I also have to remember that there's people listening, and I had to. So again, his comment made me think. And I replied to the person, and I was like, I thanked him. Thank you for your criticism. I
Yeah.
mean, it's needed. You need that pushback, because if you walk through life thinking I got this, there's no challenge, there's nothing to change. You're not going to try to strive to do better. You're not going to grow. So, I mean, that's how I viewed it.
No, and that's perfect because we need, and it doesn't have to be a combative approach, right? Like,
Right.
the same experience that I had. I had posted something with regards to Ukraine on LinkedIn. And I generally don't put that kind of stuff up there, but it really touched me because I'm a parent, and it was this video of a man having to say goodbye to his little girl.
Ugh.
And for me, it really it struck me on a human level, like beyond the war, all that stuff, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't taking a political stance, and my invitation was like, hey, you know, let's go ahead and come together in a common interest and just, set intentions, and I invited people to a prayer, and not prayer in any kind of specific format other than like a well wish of, you know, support and good intentions, right?
Right.
And this gentleman who he was a military veteran, and I follow a lot of military veterans who are mindful and stuff like that. And this gentleman, he's in my network, but he really got upset. And his response was, everybody should fight for their country and da 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 da, stop whining. And I'm like, hey, listen, I appreciate you and thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts, but I invite you to consider that not everybody's fighting in the fight in the same way. It's because some people are fighting in the way of, having to be the parents of the kids who go to fight. Some people are the ones going to school to create the technology to be able to give the resources so that fighting isn't necessary in the future. There's, the people who are going into the medical field to be able to tend to the wounded when they come back.
Right.
I said, so, let's go ahead and respect that, that yes, this is the path that you took, but because we don't, sign up to be in the military to fight in the way you did, then it doesn't count. I said, we're here the invitation is for us to come together in humanity. And if that's not okay with you, I respect it, but it doesn't have a place here.
Agreed. Yeah, I
Right?
mean,
And
it's tough because, especially with the Ukraine thing going on, it's heartbreaking, especially when you
it
see
is.
children, their schools being demolished.
Yeah.
And I'm one of these people. I'm not saying I'm naive, or maybe I just don't understand, but I don't grab the concept of war overall. I don't even understand. I mean, I know there's real reasons out there. I mean, I get that, but when you really take it down to the human level, how is it that two nations are like, well, I don't like you because you believe this? Like, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
You're on
Well,
your side of the world. We're on our side of the world. We're alive. We breathe. I have this thing. The saying I have. If you want a religion, humanity. If you want a race, human. And if you want a place to call home, Earth. I don't know.
there you go. I'm with you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, how's
Completely
it?
with you.
It should be that
But
simple.
war is not a humanitarian concept. So that's why we can't relate because we're operating in this concept of, humanity, right?
Yeah.
Like in unity and commonality, and war doesn't apply to that at all. So it's a whole different construct, whole different concept that, we don't
Yeah,
operate in.
it
So
saddens me.
yeah, agreed. I agree with you completely, 100%. And that's why it's important because this is where we do the war in our own everyday interactions because this person who, with valid reasons to feel the way he feels, kind of created this blank statement and idea that if you're not operating with this intention of like fighting for your country, then you're not a good American, right?
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to understand you, so so let me know. And I pretty much posted it in that way. I was like, I respect what you say and what you think, and I really appreciate it because this is another reason why I'm making this invitation because we have to appreciate and value our freedom because people like you have committed their lives to ensure that we keep it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then so it was an invitation. He shared his thoughts, and I was like, you know what? Thank you. And to your point, how you responded to that individual, thank you because it makes us more aware. I don't walk in your shoes, and this helps me understand and have a greater depth of understanding. And for that, I'm super grateful because now I can think about that moving forward as well, right? Like I don't have to derail myself in any kind of way, but like, oh, okay, I can be more mindful of that and have a deeper understanding, so that when people are coming from a certain way, I know how to empathize.
Right. Yeah, it's
Right?
perspective. Like, the 3P&R stands for three perspectives of neutral research, right? Allows
There it is.
my perspective, the guest perspective, and the audience. Because
Yeah.
I have strong beliefs, and I apologize to everyone that listens to the show. Especially when it comes to ufology and paranormal, I have really strong beliefs as I do research, and then I draw my own conclusions and theory. But I still evolve. If I learn something new, I'm going to evolve. Like today, I learned the pause method. I'm going to add that to what I thought, what I already,
Please do. I am excited for you. No, and that's wonderful, and that's why I'm grateful to have these kinds of conversations. I'm grateful to people like you who create these platforms so that these dialogues can happen and give people that opportunity to listen to other perspectives, so that if there's a new little seed that can be planted, if there's a little bit of something that can help you apply anything that will make life better for you in any kind of way, then we've done our job. That's why I shared with you, even when we first talked about doing this show, it's like, that's the end game, right? Like,
Yeah.
just if my life experience and what I've cultivated, and if I can share that in any of it to do even a little bit of good in one person's life, then life is great.
Yeah.
I've done my job, right?
Because what
So-
you might have done is and I say this to a lot of people, if you do something positive and affects one person positively, that person could be write a book one day that changes a whole nation.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't know.
It's
There's
the
a
butterfly
big,
effect.
huge effects.
Yeah, it's called the butterfly effect. If you're interested, there's one of my favorite authors that I really enjoy. He likes to intertwine history with teaching these personal development principles. Just kind of just personal mastery. His name is Andy Andrews, Southern guy. Really really cool the way he writes, and very interesting, especially for someone who resisted reading books in high school because I was told that I had to do certain things. But I digress. Anyways, he actually wrote it's a really small little book called The Butterfly Effect by Andy Andrews, and it's really cool because he ties historical people to the influence and impact of current life, right?
Right.
And the reason why he wrote this book is because what we were saying at the very beginning, and why we came together in this conversation, was that everything that we all do, every decision that we make, every action that we take, has an influence on everybody else, because we're all part of the same thread of creation, right? We're all part of the same fabric of life,
Right.
whether we believe that or not. And this is a really cool book that gives you really tangible examples, because if you're out there listening and you've ever had that thought cross your mind that, you're not good enough to share your ideas, you're not ready to, or you don't have the skill set, or whatever story you tell yourself as to why you haven't taken that leap to write that book, to take that course, to start that business, or whatever that is, know that it matters, because there's someone waiting for you to take that leap, because they need your knowledge, they need your experience, they need your wisdom, what you've learned, what to do and what not to do, and they will not get it until you deliver that promise of fulfilling the gift of sharing what you came here to give.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right?
It takes one person to be inspired to put the literature together to change the masses. One
Yeah.
person.
And that's all it takes. And there's not a thing. If you're alive, you matter. If you're breathing, you matter.
Agreed.
If you're listening right now, this is your sign, because you've been hesitating, waiting for the right thing. This is your sign to just do it. Imperfect action, even if you mess up the first time, 5 times. I've been messing up for decades, and I'm finally getting it right. So just know that if it's possible for me, it's possible for you.
Indeed. Well, that's what I appreciate about you, and I'm glad I had you on for that. Before we close, though, if other people want to reach out to you or find you, or maybe get consultation, how would they reach out to you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Cynthia Martin. You can look up Cynthia Martin, Personal Freedom Activator. That's probably the place I check most. I have my website, which I'm gonna spell it out. It's Lumiere Energy Healing. It's LUMIERE energyhealing.com. You can send me an email through there, or you can find me on social media, Instagram, it's Ultimate Empowerment, and then I'm on Lumiere Energy Healing and Facebook. So, yeah.
And I'll put all that in description too, so people can find the
Perfect,
links.
excellent.
So
I appreciate it, and I got some stuff coming out, some free guides and stuff, so that people can start to use the pause method or just other tools
to deal with your attorney and the rest of the staff in your mind. Take pause, have a meeting.
In your mind, and just and be kinder to yourself. If nothing else, listen, just take one step right now and be kinder to yourself in what you say in your own mind when you're alone with you. That's the first step, and start to change your dialogue and go treasure hunting in your past for the good, and forget about all that hasn't gone well, because you've already been there, done that. So this is your chance to try something new.
Excellent. Cynthia, it's been a pleasure. I'm glad I had you on.
I'm so grateful for you, and thank you, Adam. You have a wonderful rest of the day.
You as well. We'll talk soon.